All right, so you've been wrestling with
Oh, yeah.
Karl Marx's El Capital, Crítica de la Economía Política.
It's a tough one.
And let's be real, it's not exactly a beach read,
Right.
but you've highlighted some really fascinating sections.
Exactly.
So we're here to kind of help you unpack those key ideas and see how they connect to the bigger picture of Marx's critique of capitalism.
It's a dense text for sure, but there are some real gems in there.
Absolutely.
Especially when you focus on the parts that sparked your interest.
Exactly. And one of those seems to be the process of capital production.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty technical.
It does.
But I think it gets to the heart of what Marx is trying to say.
Absolutely. This is where he lays out his theory of how capitalism actually generates profit.
Okay.
And it's not just about buying low and selling high.
Right.
As you might think.
Okay, so let's break that down.
Okay.
Marx starts with commodities, right? Things we buy and sell every day.
Right. But he argues that commodities have this dual nature.
Okay.
There's the use value, which is pretty straightforward.
Okay.
A coat keeps you warm, a phone lets you communicate.
Yeah.
But then there's the exchange value.
Right.
And that's where things get interesting.
So the exchange value is basically the price tag.
Yeah.
Right. But Marx seems to be saying it's more than that.
Exactly. The exchange value represents how much a commodity is worth in the market.
Yeah.
And Marx argues that this value is ultimately determined by the amount of labor that went into producing it.
So the dual nature of commodities is crucial because it sets the stage for Marx's theory of exploitation.
Yes.
He's arguing that the gap between the use value and the exchange value, that difference is where profit comes from.
Right.
And that's where things get really interesting for you as someone who's been highlighting these sections.
You got it. Marx is saying that workers are paid for their labor power, their ability to work.
Okay.
But the value they create through their work is actually greater than the value of their wages.
Okay.
That difference, the surplus value, is where capitalist profit comes from.
So if I'm working in a factory making shoes, I'm getting paid for my time and effort.
Exactly.
But the value of the shoes I produce in a day is actually higher than my wage.
Right.
And that extra value goes to the factory owner, the capitalist.
Exactly. And Marx argues that this inherent imbalance, where the worker doesn't receive the full value of their labor, is a form of exploitation.
Marx uses the word exploitation,
which
might feel strong, but he's got a specific meaning.
He does.
He's not talking about unfairness in a general sense.
Right.
He's arguing that the worker is literally creating more value than they're paid for.
Yeah.
How does that concept land for you?
It's definitely a challenging idea. Yeah. But it gets to the heart of Marx's critique of capitalism.
Right.
He's not simply saying that capitalists are greedy or that wages are too low.
Yeah.
He's arguing that exploitation is built into the very structure of the system.
Now, you also highlighted a section about primitive accumulation.
Yes.
It seems like Marx is saying that capitalism's origins are rooted in violence.
Yeah.
This primitive accumulation, think land enclosures, forcing people into factory work, created the power imbalance between workers and capitalists.
Yeah.
That still echoes today.
It does.
Does this connect with any of your own observations about economic inequality?
Yes. This historical context is crucial for understanding Marx's argument.
Okay.
He's saying that capitalism didn't just emerge naturally from people trading goods and services. It involved a process of forceful dispossession.
Okay.
Where people were stripped of their land and means of subsistence.
Okay.
And forced to sell their labor power in order to survive.
So it's not just about some people being thrifty and building businesses.
It's not just that there's this darker history
that
shapes the whole system.
This brings us to another concept.
Okay.
You highlighted the idea that labor power itself becomes a commodity.
This is a key point. Think of it this way. Under capitalism, workers don't sell the products of their labor directly.
Okay.
Instead, they sell their ability to work,
their
labor power, to the capitalist.
So I'm selling my time and skills to an employer. I'm essentially becoming,
in a sense,
a walking, talking commodity myself.
And this commodification of labor has profound implications for how the system functions.
This tension between labor and capital is something you've been highlighting a lot in your notes.
Yeah.
What aspects of the struggle feel particularly relevant to you based on your own experiences?
Well, it's fascinating to see how this dynamic plays out in different contexts.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking about factory workers in the 19th century or gig workers in the 21st century, there's this underlying tension between those who own the means of production and those who sell their labor power.
It's a theme that seems to run through history.
It does.
Even as the forms of work and production change.
Absolutely. And Marx's analysis gives us a framework for understanding these power dynamics and how they shape our economic lives.
We've been digging into some pretty fundamental concepts in Marx's analysis of capitalism, like how profit is generated and the historical roots of this system. But you also flagged a section about the contradictions inherent in capitalism.
Yes.
What did Marx see as fundamentally unstable?
This is where Marx's work.
Okay.
It's really interesting. He argued that capitalism, for all its dynamism and capacity for growth, is actually prone to crisis. It's not a stable system. And he pointed to several key contradictions that create this instability.
Now, I'm no economist.
Sure.
But even I can see that economies go through ups and downs. We've all seen those boom and bust cycles.
Exactly. And Marx wasn't just observing those cycles. He was trying to explain why they happen. One of the key contradictions he identified is the tendency for the rate of profit to fall over time.
Wait, wouldn't capitalists want the rate of profit to keep going up?
It seems counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But think about it this way. To stay competitive and maximize profits, capitalists are constantly investing in new technology and machinery.
So they can make more stuff with fewer workers. That makes sense for efficiency.
But here's the catch. If labor is the source of surplus value, and you're reducing the amount of labor needed, you're also undermining the very basis of profit. You end up with what Marx called a crisis of overproduction.
So you've got all the stuff being produced. But not enough people with wages to buy it all. I'm starting to see how these contradictions play out, and this is just one contradiction.
Marx identified several. Another is the inherent conflict between capitalists who are driven to maximize profits and workers who want better wages and working conditions. It's a classic struggle between labor and capital.
Marx isn't making predictions, but he is outlining these pressure points within capitalism.
He is.
Do any of these potential crises, like overproduction or automation, feel especially pressing to you today?
It's fascinating how some of these dynamics feel so relevant even now. Think about the anxieties we see today around automation and job displacement. Those anxieties echo some of Marx's concerns about how technology can be used to intensify exploitation and displace workers.
It's like he's whispering from the 19th century saying, I told you so.
Yeah.
But I'm also seeing in your notes that you were drawn to this concept of commodity fetishism. It sounds kind of intense.
It is.
Yeah.
It builds on what we've been discussing
Okay.
about the dual nature of commodities.
Yeah.
Marx argues that under capitalism, we tend to get so caught up in the exchange value, the price tag, that we lose sight of the human labor and social relations embedded in the things we buy and sell.
Okay. Let me try to put this in simpler terms. I buy a new phone.
Sure.
And I'm excited about all the features and the sleek design.
Yeah.
But I don't really think about the people who mined the minerals, assembled the parts, shipped it across the world.
Yeah.
All I see is the shiny object and its price.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
We become fixated on the commodity itself, almost as if it has magical powers.
Yeah.
We forget that it's a product of a complex social process involving the labor and exploitation of countless individuals.
So it's like we've been hypnotized by the market.
Yeah.
We see the thing, but
it.
not the system that created it.
Right.
This focus on exchange value leads to what Marx calls commodity fetishism.
It does.
It's this idea that we become so fixated on the object and its price that we forget about the human labor behind it.
Yeah.
You highlighted this section.
I did.
So I'm curious, does this resonate with your own experiences?
It definitely makes you think about consumption in a different way.
Yeah.
Are we just buying objects?
Right.
Or are we participating in a system that often obscures the real costs?
Right.
Marx would argue that this fetishism makes it harder to challenge the capitalist system because we're not seeing the full picture.
Now, we can't talk about Marx without addressing revolution. You marked a section about the potential for capitalism to be overthrown.
Yes.
What did he actually say about that?
It's important to understand that Marx didn't necessarily advocate for violent revolution.
Okay.
He saw it as a historical inevitability, an outcome of the inherent contradictions and class struggles we've been talking about as those tensions intensify.
Okay.
He believed the working class would eventually develop a revolutionary consciousness and act to overthrow the system.
So he's saying that the workers of the world will unite.
Yeah, but he wasn't exactly writing a how-to manual for revolution.
Right.
He envisioned a future where the means of production would be owned collectively, eliminated the exploitation of labor.
Right.
But he was quite vague on the specifics of how this transition would occur.
Right.
History, as we know, is full of unexpected twists and turns.
Okay, so a lot of revolutionary fervor, but not a detailed blueprint for change. What's fascinating here is that Marx saw technology as a double-edged sword under capitalism. On one hand, he recognizes potential to increase productivity and create material abundance. But on the other hand, he argued that technology could also be used to intensify exploitation and displace workers. Before we get to those final revolutionary ideas, can you tell me more about this double-edged sword?
It's a point that's particularly relevant today as technology advances at an even faster pace. Think about those massive factories of the Industrial Revolution. Steam engines, power looms. These new inventions revolutionized production.
And initially, they created more jobs, right? Factories needed workers to operate the machines.
Exactly. But Marx observed a trend that's become even more pronounced in our time as technology advances. It often replaces human labor. So fewer workers are needed as robots and automation take over.
So we're seeing this tension play out even more today.
Absolutely.
As automation and artificial intelligence become more sophisticated. We see anxieties about job displacement, the rise of the gig economy, all those debates about universal basic income. It's almost like those anxieties are echoing some of what Marx was worried about.
Absolutely. He argued that this displacement of workers by machines creates a real problem for capitalism. Remember, labor is the source of surplus value, the basis of profit. If you're constantly reducing the need for human labor, you're also chipping away at the foundation of the whole system.
So it's another one of those contradictions.
It is.
Capitalism needs technology to increase efficiency.
It does.
But it also creates this potential for a crisis by reducing the need for workers.
You've got, it's a theme that resonates deeply in the 21st century. And it's not just about factories and robots. Think about all the ways technology is changing. The nature of work, from algorithms controlling gig work to AI writing code. It's a much more complex landscape than in Marx's time. But some of the core dynamics he identified are still at play.
It definitely makes you think about the future of work.
It does.
If technology keeps advancing. What happens to the role of human labor in the economy? It's a question Marx was grappling with back in the 19th century. And it's even more pressing today.
It is. And while Marx wasn't offering solutions, he was pointing to these potential tensions and asking us to think critically about how technology shapes our economic lives.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
We've talked about how capitalism generates profit, its historical roots, the inherent contradictions within the system, and the impact of technology. But before we wrap up, I have to ask the big question. What did Marx think would ultimately happen to capitalism?
Well, he believed it would eventually be superseded by a more equitable and just society, a communist society. He saw this as a historical inevitability, an outcome of the class struggle and the contradictions we've been discussing.
So the workers of the world unite and overthrow the capitalist system.
It's a dramatic vision.
It is. But did he have any concrete ideas?
He was pretty vague on the details, to be honest. His focus was on analyzing capitalism's flaws and explaining why he believed it was unsustainable in the long run. He didn't offer a detailed roadmap for revolution or a blueprint for a communist utopia.
So a lot of revolutionary fervor.
Yeah.
But not necessarily a practical guide to building a new world.
Right. And history has shown us that revolutions can unfold in unpredictable ways.
Right.
Often with unintended consequences.
Okay, so let's bring it all back to you, the listener. We've taken a deep dive into Marx's El Capital Critica de la Economía Política.
Right.
And we've explored some pretty complex concepts.
Yeah.
But what are the key takeaways?
Well,
how can this knowledge be useful in understanding the world today?
I think the most valuable takeaway is Marx's critical analysis of capitalism itself.
Okay.
He gave us a framework for understanding how the system works,
right,
how it generates profit, and how it shapes social relations.
Right.
Whether you agree with all of his conclusions or not, his insights can help you see the world through a different lens, to question assumptions,
right,
and to make sense of the economic forces that impact your own life.
Exactly. It's not about becoming a Marxist or subscribing to any particular ideology. It's about developing a more critical awareness of the economic system we live in, understanding its potential and its pitfalls.
And I think that's especially important in the 21st century, as we grapple with issues like inequality,
automation, and the environmental impact of our economic activity. Marx's work can provide a useful starting point for thinking about these challenges.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's a final thought for you to ponder.
Okay.
Marx argued that capitalism contains the seeds of its own destruction. Do you see any signs of that?
That's a great question to leave our listener with.
Yeah.
There are definitely signs of stress and instability in our current economic systems. And while Marx's predictions didn't always pan out as he imagined, his work continues to provoke important questions about the long-term sustainability of capitalism and the search for more just and equitable economic models. So we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas, keep diving deep.
Absolutely.
And keep asking those tough questions.